Death is a reality I'm very fascinated by. I think about it a lot. The acknowledgement, not fear, but the acknowledgement of death has shaped me up in the last 10 years to be the person I am today. When I was a kid, I had never seen a funeral. People I knew about, people in my locality, people in my extended family passed away, but I never attended any of their funerals. For the first decade and a half of my life, I hadn't lost anyone close to me. My understanding of death, loss, and grief was quite skewed. Because I grew up watching movies, these concepts were actually quite cinematic to me. Often in the movies that I would watch, death of a family member or a loved one was a key event in the life of the character and his journey through the story. My understanding of grief of losing someone was also based on movies. A character standing by the grave of his or her loved one is quite a strong image. When I was young, I used to think that I would like to be buried after I transcend this life instead of being cremated. This wish of mine did not come from a deep understanding of the religious concepts behind being buried and being cremated. Rather, it was what I thought was a great way of honoring a loved one. And of course, movies were a big factor behind that thought process. But things have changed in the last 5 to 10 years. Now that I have been on the grieving side, my perspective on life, death, loss, and grief has changed dramatically. One thing that I've learned over time is that it's very important in life to move on from bad experiences, from failures, and from loss. It's not easy to do so, but the necessity of it cannot be stressed enough. When my grandmother passed away, that was the first loss in our family in over 35 years. Neither my father nor any of my uncles knew how to deal with that. Seeing my stoic father and my uncle, who oscillates from being goofy to being angry, cry for the first time in front of me was quite heavy. My grandfather was saying a lot of things, most of which was not making any sense. But even in that moment, I knew he was trying to make sense of everything that was happening around us. It's been over 3 years since my grandmother was cremated and her ashes were scattered in the Holy Ganga, and I have a few pictures of her in my house. But ever since her passing, I have been thinking about an alternate reality in which she was buried instead of being cremated. There would have been a grave of her, and someone from my family would have visited her grave every week. This thought of an alternate reality in which there is a constant reminder that you have lost someone is actually quite painful. Perhaps the idea of cremating a loved one after they have moved on to the afterlife is just as much for the people left behind as much as it is for the people who are gone. Holding on to the memories of a loss only add to the pain. But once they are gone and the reminders of the loss are not directly in front of our eyes, I guess adjusting to a new reality without them becomes somewhat bearable. Even though I believe in God and a higher power, I am not a very religious person. Hence, the idea behind burying a loved one and cremating them from a religious perspective isn't something that I have deep knowledge on. My understanding comes from my experiences. Perhaps the reasoning behind the last rites has always been related to letting them go. Perhaps not. But as painful as it is to let a loved one go and watch their existence turn into particles in the sea, it's equally important to not be held back by pain, regrets, and the grief of losing them.